Do you own rental properties? Does your water bill keep increasing? On this episode of Rental Owner Insight, we are going to talk about how you can keep the flow of rising utility costs from draining your wallet. My name is Doug Tabor, the rental realtor, and this is ROI. So on this episode, we're going to discuss what options you have to recapture some of those expensive utility costs that are draining the income of your property. And I do want to introduce my guest today, Sarah Hoverson. Sarah works for Livable, which is a company that specializes in this. And how are you today, Sarah?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you as well. And you hear this term RUBS, you've heard it in the past, ratio utility billing. What exactly is RUBS?
Yeah, so you'd be surprised at the number of rental housing providers that actually have not heard of RUBS. So I think this is a perfect time to get the word out. RUBS is an acronym for ratio utility billing. Most people know what submeters are. So a submeter is a device that can be put onto individual units to measure the inflow of water and outflow of waste and sewer. With RUBS, what basically we do is we take a master metered utility, usually that's water, sewer, and trash, where submeters are either too expensive or just not feasible to put onto the property, and we then divide up those charges fairly and accurately to the tenants based on an occupancy factor, so how many people are living in each unit, and then in-unit amenities like a dishwasher or a washer dryer that would affect water usage, and shared amenities, so if there's like shared laundry on site or a swimming pool or landscaping. And basically with RUBS, because it is essentially a software system that we have, it eliminates the need for any expensive hardware or installation of submeters and the ongoing maintenance involved with those. It's a very turnkey solution that can recover up to 90% of the utility expenses to property owners.
Wow, 90%. That's a big number.
It sure is. Yeah, we can't bill back 100% because we do need to acknowledge that it is an estimation, and that would account for, unreported changes in occupancy or leaks, just things that happen, month over month that we can't physically track, but we need to account for. But yeah, I mean, in a 90%, even 80%, is a huge, new kind of revenue stream for owners. Besides the obvious fact they're now recovering on those utility expenses, it really does go a long way to promote conservation at the properties and accountability from tenants. So if tenants are paying for water, they're going to use less and report leaks faster. So there really is, a silver lining for both kind of ends of the program.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. In our business, apartment buildings, rental properties, the majority, as you probably know, of the properties don't have sub-metering or multiple meters. And that's always a big challenge, right? The big one, obviously, is the rising cost of water. If you have a lot of folks living in those units, they're using a lot of water, a lot of toilet flushes, a lot of showers. And that definitely is one of the big numbers when we're analyzing a property for valuation. We're doing a cash flow analysis. One of the bigger numbers that's increasing is the water bill. But I am surprised to hear, it was going to be one of my questions, what type of utilities does RUBS cover? I thought it was just water, but you're saying that I have my notes here, sewer and trash could be included in that.
Right. So we primarily do water, sewer, and trash. In some instances, we can even do gas and electric for common areas, or potentially in unit. Just depends on what the situation is at the property, because the California Public Utilities Commission does have some regulations about billing for gas and electric, but it can be done like a hot water heater, for example, and other kind of services as well, like landscaping, pest control, things like that. So you're essentially like triple net leasing a multifamily property.
Yeah, I mean, you start including all of the recurring costs that are associated with a rental property. And if you can itemize those out, well, not itemize, if you can separate those out amongst the tenants, yeah, you're really, really increasing your income, your return on your investment of your property.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Now, of course, we're in California and we have AB 1482 that came out, rent control. How does this kind of correlate? How does RUBS work with a rent controlled market?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. And there is a distinction between rent control, like in San Francisco, which is where Livable is based out of, and Los Angeles also has a very strict rent stabilization ordinance. Thankfully, with AB 1482, they still kind of left utilities out of that. So you can still implement a RUBS program on existing tenants. Whereas in those other markets, you have to wait for a brand new lease and a new tenancy. So if you don't include that at that time, you're stuck paying for utilities for that tenant for the duration of their lease, which could be 20 years in some cases in rent control. So thankfully with AB 1482, it is still an option for month-to-month tenants. You can give a 30-day notice, you can wait for the lease renewal period, and of course, always with a new tenant, that's the easiest way in because a tenant would sign Livable's lease addendum agreeing to, at the beginning of a lease, to pay for their portion of the utilities.
Okay, I didn't really think about that. So breaking that down, there are some markets where you cannot just implement Livable's program or a RUBS system mid lease. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
So you cannot amend any sort of lease that's in place. So primarily, you're going to have to wait until that lease renewal, or if someone's month to month.
Right. So, so you'll have to wait for a lease renewal or month to month in the majority of California, outside of Los Angeles, San Francisco, a lot of the Bay Area, like Oakland also has like stricter rent control.
Mm-hmm.
But AB 1482 does not restrict, you passing through utility costs. And it actually brings up another point that I wanted to touch on. So there was a Senate bill that passed in 2017 that is going to require that all new multifamily housing built after January 1st of 2018 be submetered, and tenants have to pay for water. So it's not going to be an option in the future. Tenants must pay for water. And the reason for that was that 80% of renters in California were not paying for water historically. So because of that, obviously California has been in a drought state off and on for decades. And in order to promote conservation, the EPA and the government knows that the way to do that, to decrease or promote less usage from renters and from tenants, is to hold them accountable. So that really is the direction that the state is going. Hopefully, the state will form some sort of regulation surrounding submeters and RUBS. I know Texas has, like kind of statewide legislation around that. So hopefully that will come down the pipe. As of now, it is kind of like varies market to market what you can do, which is why it's important to use, a third party that has a background in doing this. So, you make sure that you're staying above board.
Yeah, I could see definitely the accountability factor is huge, right? Of course, if tenants aren't paying for the water, then they're going to use as much water as they want.
Yeah.
Anytime you hold someone accountable by putting a dollar figure on it or a cost on it, obviously they're not going to use as much. So that circling back a little bit, that raises the question: if a landlord or rental property owner wanted to institute a RUBS program, do they have to wait till all of the tenants are all of the leases or all of the tenants are in the same location as far as their lease terms, or can they implement it like one unit at a time? How does that work? So let's say you have a 10-unit apartment building.
That's a good question. I know I can't speak for other providers. I know that for Livable, we do not require that a full building would be enrolled at once. So because we work in these rent control markets where you can only do one at a time, we allow for that in our system. So it can certainly just be one unit at a time, and they just kind of waterfall on over time. So one unit at a time. We also don't have any unit minimums. So we can help people with duplexes. We even do some single family, all the way up into your garden style communities. So yeah, I mean, it's better to have the foresight and be proactive about this now. We have some clients that wait until they hit a certain threshold at their building before actually turning on the program or before passing through all of the charges to the tenants. So, they might say we want to get 50% of the building enrolled before we start passing through all the charges. So it's very flexible. I mean, there's lots of ways to roll it out, whatever makes most sense for the property owner as well as for their tenants. But yeah, there's no requirement that a full building would need to come on. And one other thing that I wanted to mention to the previous question was that in terms of accountability, we've seen, and this is kind of seen across the industry, is that once you start passing through these costs and having accountability from tenants, usage typically goes down. So we've been in business for 11 years, so we have a lot of our own kind of historical data to show that usage goes down anywhere from 20 to 30%. So not only are you recovering on expenses, but tenants are now more mindful of their usage. So they're using less. So your overall bill expense goes down. And I know that across, multifamily, usually utility expenses are like the third, highest line item for monthly costs.
Yeah, that's a huge number. I mean, 30% reduction in the water costs. I mean, when you think about it, when you kind of go down the list of what the costs are, obviously taxes are a huge one, the insurance, third-party property management, but water is like always up there, in the top 3 or 4. And being able to recoup any of those costs. It's really a big issue for owners, especially as profits are getting squeezed. We have a lot of new legislation that's causing owners to have to spend more money on attorney fees and other fees, or some tenants aren't paying because of COVID. So really, it makes a lot of sense. Has COVID affected anything with regards to Livable or RUBS or that you've seen out there in the marketplace?
Yeah, so yes and no. With the most recent Senate Bill 91, which is the federal relief to property owners and tenants, there is a guideline in there that basically says if a tenant has submitted a declaration of hardship and they're behind in rent from a certain period of time, sorry, let me close this. You cannot, and I believe it's, a rolling period of a year, you cannot introduce new charges for things that previously you'd not been charging for. So if water had been included in a lease before, even if they're month to month, you cannot now introduce that as a new charge. But that is specific just to tenants that, that have submitted that declaration and that are behind in rent. Now, due to COVID, and just because, we did obviously have a lot of clients that were very sensitive to the fact that they didn't want to, introduce additional costs to tenants at this time. A lot of their residents were, out of work or just struggling financially. Which we completely understand. However, that does not change the fact that tenants are at home now versus being at work, so they're using more resources. And again, we as a company like to focus on the conservation aspect and just accountability. So what Livable came up with is a different type of program. It's called a net zero billing initiative, where we essentially do all the work where we would show a tenant a statement that shows, this is how much you've used, these are what rates are, this is, what you would be paying if you were responsible, but it's a $0 bill. So it's basically just a statement educating them and informing them, giving them conservation tips. There was a study done by the EPA a few years ago that showed that just making that information available to tenants without charging them resulted in reduced consumption of 15%. So that's kind of the alternative service that we've started during COVID, just to, again, like, we want that awareness. We want tenants to know that, water is being paid for, subsidized essentially from their provider, and really just, again, encouraging them to be smarter with their usage and report leaks. So it's still an option. There's actually more options now than before, I think, with COVID. So.
Wow, that's really good. And that, of course, gets them in the habit of receiving something. I know when I get my utility bill in the mail, next day I'm turning off lights as I walk around the house. We're taking old Navy showers like we did in the Marine Corps. We're turning the water off halfway through. Interesting. So I know there's a lot of companies out there that have been doing, RUBS has been around for a long time, obviously, but Livable's really come up and made a name for themselves, being more of a modern company. I know you guys have some software and you're dealing with a lot of clients. You guys are doing a lot of business, I'm sure. Give me a kind of a scenario or maybe a case study or an example of an apartment building owner or a fourplex owner that was really kind of a standout situation for you guys. Do you have one?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, as I mentioned, Livable's been in business for about 11 years, but you're right, this type of program has been in place or has been around for a couple of decades now. But really, our differentiator, again, is that we don't have unit minimums. So a lot of the independent owners, smaller rental, property owners or managers previously didn't know that this was an option, or might have looked into it and seen that they didn't qualify. So Livable works a lot with apartment associations across the state of California, and now increasingly into other markets, because we know that a lot of the independent owners are part of the apartment association. So we work with Southern California Rental Housing Association down here in San Diego.
How we met.
Yeah, and across the state. And yeah, and again, like, owners are just shocked to see the results in just, like, just almost immediately results. Their bills go down. Now we can't, guarantee that, but we've seen it again and again, where, tenants are, I'm sure you've heard horror stories. I've heard all sorts of stories about, tenants. We had one owner who gave a notice to tenants that they were going to start paying for water, and one of the tenants started, throwing a fit because he would leave his shower on all night because that was his, like, ambient white noise was running water. And he would do that every night. So, there's just little things like that you might not even know are happening. There could be a running toilet for 6 months that's not being reported. As soon as you turn on a program like this, you're going to get a call the next day because they know they're going to see it on their bill. So.
Yeah, that's why I opened with the fact that rising utility costs are draining your income, because it's really draining it going down the drain. And if there's accountability, that's going to be a huge mental goal for our tenants, is to reduce their costs, especially if they're more accountable for it. And what I've experienced also is that the banks love it. The lenders like to see that there is some sort of accountability for the utilities, and that you're getting more income back as an owner, right? By billing your tenants for utility.
Yeah, so by increasing, your net operating income, I know utilities is one way to do that. Other things that people do are like charging for parking and pet rent and, storage space. So all of those things, add up to really increase your NOI, and then in turn your cap rate. So, it's definitely like a long-term play. But it makes sense versus the alternative, which is you continue to pay and costs continue, to rise in perpetuity. When was the last time you got something from the city saying that rates were going down? Never.
Yeah, never. And we're living in a desert, and we import this water, and they're not building any more plants to create more water. So tell us, what does Livable actually provide? What kind of services do you guys provide? What does that system or program look like for the average rental property owner?
Yeah, so I mean, basically, our service is to gather bill data. So we can do that, through a couple of ways. The easiest way is to just go into the online account of the owner, download the bills directly, so the owner doesn't have to, email us a copy of the bills every month. We then divide up the bills, generate tenant statements. We can either post the charges to the tenant's ledger in Livable. So the tenants have a Livable account. They receive an email with their statement. They log into their tenant portal to make a payment. We collect the money from the tenants. We have a tenant support team to answer any questions they might have about their bill or about the program. And then we reimburse the owner. So it's very passive from the owner's perspective. We kind of just, work kind of as an extension of their management team to communicate with the tenants and have that relationship. And then they get a direct deposit from us every month. So that's one option. The other option is if they use a property management software, or if they prefer to have the tenants include their utilities with rent, then that is an alternative option. So basically we do everything up to the collection piece, but the tenants pay the owners directly, which is obviously faster for cash flow purposes. It just, a tiny bit more management on their end, keeping track of who's paid and who hasn't. But sometimes that's also easier for the tenants to just have one place to pay versus two. I will say, however, sometimes with rent control, owners like to keep the two completely separate, just from that perspective that the tenants might have. They say, okay, I'm paying my utilities here, I'm paying my rent here. But basically there's options. With the net zero billing option, we also, obviously there's no payment that's being made, but tenants get, an email each month with their statement. They still have that online portal where they can see, original bill amounts, what are rates, all of that information. And you'd be surprised at how, interested tenants are to learn that. And I think that in California, we do have a lot of very, green types here that truly care about the environment, and, knowledge is power. So if you can empower them with that information, it definitely makes a difference. So
Yeah.
those are the main services we provide. For kind of larger operators, we also have a benchmarking and analytics solution as well. So, being able to actually monitor the performance of your properties, either against other properties in your portfolio or against, other properties in the area. We have some kind of benchmarking data to show that can help point out, inefficiencies in the either the meters or the property, and kind of identify opportunities to improve there.
Wow, so you guys really provide a lot of service, everything from the all-inclusive service to the rental property owners and landlords, to something that's more in line with the property managers, to even the bigger companies. So you guys can do everything.
And also one thing that I want to touch on, we briefly mentioned sub-meters at the beginning. A lot of people are interested in sub-metering their properties because it truly is the most accurate way to divide up a bill. But Livable does not, deal in the hardware sale or installation of those sub-meters. We are a software company, but what we can do is help with the billing function of that. So even if you have a sub-meter in place, you're going to need someone to, reconcile that data against your bill and produce a statement for the tenants. So we can help with sub-meter billing if sub-meters are in place, or if an owner does decide to spend the money to install sub-meters.
Got it. So you guys really can help with the billing aspect. The billing is a big part of it, right? Who wants to send out additional bills to their tenants on a monthly basis?
Exactly. And have to explain those charges, it's the part of it is, being compliant, being transparent, and using, methods that are again, industry standard, but also just having a company that has been, doing this for a long time, that knows how to stay in compliance with all the, ever-changing regulatory things that happen in California. So it's important, you don't want to overcharge. You also don't want to leave money on the table. So I think that is the reason why a lot of people choose to use a third party. And to that point as well, a lot of people might say, oh, I like that idea, but I'm just going to do a flat rate, or I've been just charging a flat $50 a month for utilities. Again, you risk either overbilling or underbilling, but you also don't have the accountability factor. So it's like kind of like being at a buffet. If you pay $20, you're going to eat whatever you want. Same thing with, a flat rate for utilities. There's no incentive for tenants to monitor or make smarter usage habits.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I'm surprised. Well, I'm sure you guys are very busy, especially nowadays when things are getting more and more expensive for rental property owners. We're not going to talk about the costs. I mean, I'm sure they can go to your website or contact you and talk about the costs. I'm assuming because you guys are so busy that it's not cost prohibitive. I mean, if they're making nothing now, they're actually spending money on those utilities. Any sort of return is going to be beneficial for them.
Yeah, and it actually is very low price point. It's from basically ranges from $6 to $10 per unit, but a lot of times owners choose to either share or pass through that cost to the tenant, which essentially would make the program free almost. But even at a $6 or $10 rate for what you recoup, definitely makes sense. And we also have like discount volume pricing and stuff. So yeah, definitely would love to chat with anybody about that. I also want to mention, I know we're going to put some links in the show notes. We do have a pro forma calculator that I'll share the link to. That's really helpful for underwriting purposes, but also to give you an idea of kind of what the breakdown of your bill would be. Not only how much can you stand to recover, but also what that would look like for each tenant, how much they would owe based on the number of occupants. So really handy calculator, very user-friendly. So I'll be sure to include that as well.
Yeah, awesome. So we'll include all of that in the description down below. I don't know if you want to give out any contact information, or should we just point them directly to a specific spot on the website?
Yeah, well, I'll send them to the website. There's a link on there to schedule a call, and I get all those, emails, requests, and meetings and stuff. So if anyone goes to the website and gets in touch, it'll come right to me. So.
All right, perfect. Well, Sarah, this was awesome. If you're a rental property owner out there, if you're a landlord, and I talk to a lot of them all week long, and I know one of the biggest concerns right now are the rising cost of utilities. If you want to recover some of those costs, you should check out Livable's program. They're doing a lot of business. They're a part of the Southern California Rental Housing Association, and that is good enough for me to bring them out on the show and kind of support them. So Sarah, thanks for spending some time with us and giving us all this great information.
Yeah, definitely. Anytime. Happy to chat with you, and hope to hear from people and share the savings.
Absolutely. Well, guys, go ahead and hit the link below and learn some information, more information from Livable. Hit subscribe if you want to receive these updates on a regular basis. I'm constantly going to try to bring folks onto the podcast that can help you improve your ROI. So for Rental Owner Insight, I'm Doug Tabor, the rental realtor, and hope to see you next time. Thanks, Sarah.
Bye.
Bye, guys.